Hello, Facebook Live. We gave this a shot a few minutes ago and we're trying again, and we are live now, I can tell. My name is Jesse Nolan. I'm the membership manager at the Jazz Education Network. Thanks for joining us a few minutes late, and we'll give everyone a chance to hop on here. This is our featured webinar for the week called Rehearsing the Vocal Ensemble After COVID-19. A more fitting title may possibly be Rehearsing the Vocal Ensemble During COVID-19, as what our panel will be discussing today are the strategies and techniques that they're thinking about for a return to school in the fall. So with us, we have some very esteemed vocal educators. I will introduce them now, and then I'm going to kick it over to one of them to get started. Please, if you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat and Facebook Live, and we will be throwing those questions to our panel as we go through the hour here. We have with us today Dan Gregerman, Jennifer Barnes, Christine Guter, Drew Dahan, and John Stafford. Please, if you're not a member of Gen, check us out on the web. The URL's behind me. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dan Gregerman.
Thanks, Jesse, and thanks everybody for joining us live today. I want to say before we get started, all the things that you're going to hear from us are our individual opinions and thoughts. They're in no way the answers, and especially when things are changing weekly, daily, and by the hour, everything can change. So as for myself, I'm a high school director. I have 5 concert choirs and 3 vocal jazz ensembles. And all of those, I'll talk really briefly about the thought process. Our school is talking about going back probably in a hybrid, but they haven't decided what that looks like. And they're also talking about letting specials back in, but they haven't decided what specials are and which ones can go in. So I'm planning on what would happen if I'm back more than what I'm going to do outside of rehearsal. So my plans to go back are to spread things out in the choir room. With the regular choirs, I can get things in a big choir room spread out with 6 feet between people. And my personal belief is I would rather have people in the room singing live with a mask on rather than not being together live. So that's step one. As far as the extracurricular, the vocal jazz groups meet in the evenings, and I think those are a little easier to deal with because we only have 12 to 16 in a vocal jazz ensemble. And my thought process on that is you can bring 12 people in, spread them out 6 feet apart, and have a rehearsal, let's say on a Tuesday evening where one of the vocal jazz groups comes in, rehearses for an hour and a half. You have a 15-minute time period in between for people to leave, to sanitize, wipe down things, and make sure you spray and all those kind of wonderful things of cleaning, and then have another group come in and be there for an hour and a half. So that's kind of in a nutshell some of the things that I'm looking at in hopes of going back live. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit afterwards about the online stuff. I'm going to turn it over for a moment to Jennifer Barnes.
Thanks, Dan. Hi. I'm glad to be part of this. We're all facing so many challenges, and I feel very humbled. To be perfectly honest, I'm at the state where at University of North Texas, we have 4 vocal jazz ensembles. And at this point, the university has clearly said that the priority as far as teaching and what is back in person on campus is for ensembles to be rehearsing. That is the #1 priority. And private lessons will be able to be taught in studios where there's sufficient room for social distancing. So we spent a good deal of time doing some measurements. We discovered that our usual room for rehearsals for vocal jazz ensembles is not sufficient for ensembles of any size. Ours include vocalists and rhythm section, all 4 of the groups. So we have looked for an alternative room, and that's what we're working with now. So we too are looking at it's actually going to be a bit of a blended scenario where we will have live rehearsals. Our rehearsal space, I'm looking at the numbers that I have written down. There are some various mathematical possibilities. So I may be doing a combination of some small groups and then also doing some larger groups. We can fit as many as 21 students in the room with 6 feet apart, or 14 people if it's 9 feet apart, or some combination in between where the rhythm section, who is not going to be singing, could be a little closer together and the singers a little farther apart. that's about the extent of what I know right now, for sure. So working on things like, and we can discuss these more later, but we're working on making a purchase of an in-ear monitoring system so that we don't have to set up floor monitors. We obviously wouldn't have enough for each student, but they will be able to hear better. And also having a combination of that and doing some outside of rehearsal time recording project, which we did not actually do in the spring. We stopped when the spring break occurred. We didn't continue with anything. So I'll be taking notes from many of you on how to do some of that, and I'm working on catching up my learning curve this summer. So that's enough of introduction from me. I'll pass it off to John Stafford.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Stafford. I teach at a community college in Kansas City called Kansas City, Kansas Community College. I teach 2 vocal jazz ensembles and 2 choirs and music history. And I was just approved today to have rehearsals on campus. I'm in a similar situation as Jen, where I'm going to rehearse on campus. All of our ensembles have been approved for that. And we're still in the process of organizing on how to do so in terms of vocal jazz ensembles. We just purchased an in-ear monitor system, and so we can spread apart. And I'm still in the process of measuring my room to see how many students I can fit. We can roughly fit 20 students in there, but we still have to make the measurements to really make sure. That's just an estimate right now. Also, we're talking about, we're going to experiment with wearing masks. We're going to also experiment with using a face shield, even though aerosols can go around the face shield. But we're going to experiment with masks and face shield, or maybe both at the same time while singing, and see what that does. I think everything right now is just an experiment, and there's not an answer that is 100% foolproof, but you have to do the best you can. And so, because I think all of us agree, it's difficult to do an ensemble to teach them everything that the students need to know when it's 100% online. So that's very difficult, but that's where we are at that moment. And in terms of choir, I'm really a choral director by training. And so in terms of choir, I have a concert choir between 50 and 60 students. And so what I'm planning to do is split up my concert choir into 4 different ensembles, use student leaders, and just rotate ensembles in multiple rooms during that 1 hour, 3 days a week that I have them, and try to space them out. And we even talked about doing either like a live stream concert at the end of the semester, or we're talking about doing pre-recorded concerts, where even the small ensemble concert choir, which would be 12 to 15 students, if we can spread them out on an auditorium stage, would that work as well? And would that also work with wearing masks and wearing a shield? I'm not really comfortable without having one of those 2 things while they perform. So then we get into the conversation about what does it sound like when you sing with a mask and when you sing with a shield. And so that's where we are right now. But I'm hopeful for everything to work out, and at least we're in a place where I can provide them an experience that I think would be helpful, more so than doing online. I personally struggled with the online instruction after the pandemic happened. So I'm looking forward to learning from everybody here, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'll pass it on to Drew Dahan.
All right, thanks, John. Hi, I'm Drew Dahan. I teach in Highland Park, which is a north suburb of Chicago, and I teach high school. I have 3 traditional choirs, as well as a vocal jazz ensemble and a madrigal / contemporary a cappella ensemble. And, kind of going off of what John said, I think we can all say that we struggled a bit once the pandemic hit, because what we do is so rooted in community and being together and, just the energy that happens when we're in the room. And, our school district in particular has not made a decision as to how we're going to be in the fall. There are 3 possible scenarios, one being completely online like we were in the spring, one being in person, but, and a hybrid sort of thing, some in person, some online, which that's a whole different beast. And then one being all in person with masks and with spacing regulations. So as far as my choirs, the thought that we have at this point is we may think about doing rehearsals in our auditorium because it's big enough, obviously, to fit us all in the seats and with the social distancing, and also possibly in the cafeteria. Like basically any big common space that we can get is what we're looking at, and obviously wearing masks because I think that's going to be mandated at school. And for the vocal jazz ensemble, I think we can do it in the choir room. It's going to be possible because it's a smaller group, although it's bigger than it has been, but I still have enough space, thankfully. And I think rehearsing on mics is going to be the way, because we can still put our monitors out, we can put our board out, and they can be spaced out enough and still be able to hear themselves, theoretically. So obviously that's going to be a lot of sort of trying to figure out the best settings for that, the best spacing, the best placement. As much as I'd love to do plexiglass shields for in between everybody, reality of a budget being a thing, I don't know that can happen, unfortunately. But for me, number one is trying to be together but doing it safely, I think, is the big thing. I've also seen, and something I might think about is also maybe doing some outdoor rehearsals. Now, of course, in Chicago, that'll work for like maybe a month and a half before the weather starts to get a little crazy. And even at middle August, it's going to be really hot out there. So maybe a tent outside. I'll be talking to my school about this. But I'm just trying to keep as many options open as possible, and of course, as Dan said at the beginning, this could all change tomorrow, depending on what our state says, what our governor says, and what our district decides to do. So I'm also looking forward to hearing from my colleagues here on the panel. And I'm going to pass it off to Christine Guter.
Thank you. Hi. Well, I'm teaching at Cal State Long Beach, which is a part of Los Angeles County, and of course it's one of the places that's been hit pretty hard. So the plan right now is that, well, we still don't know what's going to happen. It's looking optimistic that the vocal jazz might be able to meet. For the entire Bob Cole Conservatory at Long Beach State, there will be no large ensembles offered, no choir offered. They just don't see a way that it can be done safely. So they're offering alternate types of experiences for the students. They decided that the course outcomes couldn't be met by doing those classes online. So they're offering other things. Vocal jazz ensembles and big bands are still on the table, and we have our fingers crossed. We have 3 vocal jazz ensembles. They have said that if it passes, we can only offer 1 of those ensembles. Again, I think that has to do with the number of bodies on campus and sanitizing the rooms after rehearsals are done. They just want to do it as safely as possible. So I'm moving forward as if it's going to meet in person because it's now looking good. They said even though our rehearsals are going to be held in our performance space, which seats about 325, 350 people, they will only allow 8 to 9 people in the room at a time. Every student has to have their own microphone and cable, so they're not sharing equipment. We will be using either in-ear monitors or floor wedges or a combination of those 2. My group is usually 12 singers and a 3 or 4 piece rhythm section, so I haven't decided yet how I'm going to do that. I don't know if it'll be, I'm going to have 12 people or maybe 14 or 16 people and do 2 separate groups. I don't know if I'm going to have it be a cappella or not. A lot of it just depends on the situation. The original thought was to have my regular 12-person group and split them into 2 different places. So half the group would rehearse in one area, half the group would rehearse in another, and switch it up. So maybe it's 2 mixed sextets. Maybe one rehearsal, it's tenors and basses in one spot, sopranos and altos in another spot, or a combination of sections, but and giving them the same literature in hopes that we would be able to perform together. next semester or by the end of fall semester because so much is uncertain. I'm not really sure how I want to do that. And another option was maybe I have, even though I'm only getting paid for one ensemble, maybe I create two ensembles and just have them be in separate rooms and I bounce back and forth and have student leaders take and have them be a cappella so more singers could be involved. It's hard to say what's going to happen. And a lot of it depends too, at the college level, we may have students who don't want to come back to school. If every single class is being offered online except for one ensemble, do they really want to move out of their parents' house, pay rent when they probably don't have a job still to show up for one class? So a lot is still up in the air.
Mhm.
Kind of riffing off of what Christine just said, I know I've seen in various groups on Facebook, for vocal directors there are people who are sort of turning their ensembles into more music appreciation courses, and completely respect that idea. But I know for myself, there are a lot of kids who that's not what they signed up for. That's not what they want to do. And again, coming back to the idea of they want to sing, they want to sing with other people. I did some of that in the spring semester, and it was a struggle because a lot of kids did not want to be doing that, and so we lost a little bit of the participation because of that. But it was better than nothing, So obviously we're all going to have to still be kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But the good thing is now we've had some time to experience it and not have a week to figure it all out, And so I think one of the biggest worries I know I have is, and perhaps my colleagues have the same thing, with students that are incoming that you haven't really gotten to know or meet yet. And, I think one of the biggest themes for me this year, other than the singing part of it, is creating community within our ensembles, within our programs, because that's where everything starts. That's the bedrock of what we do, is creating a family within our ensembles, within our programs. And so, I think that's going to be a large part of the beginning of my year, and hopefully finding ways to do that through music and through singing, because that's what's going to get people to buy in and want to stay, even though things are going to be really weird.
Taking off with what you said, Drew, I would agree with you. I had to look for some alternative ways of doing things when the large choir format I didn't think was going to really work at the time and over the end of school. And so I took it upon myself to look at things a little bit out of the box, and instead of being performance driven, so often we're driven to performance and literature, and there's all these other things that we as educators say, I wish I had time to do this, and I wish I had time to do this. Well, I found that now we had the time to do those things. So I spent a while talking about songwriting and talked about the music theory and the form behind songs, had my students writing lyrics that were influenced by either things going on in their life, or they could write about things that were going on during COVID, which was, of course, a big part of everybody's life. And then I was able to take some programs like Sound Lab and Soundtrap and have kids collaborate in groups of 3 or more. Three or less. I tried to keep them in groups of 2 or 3, and they would collaborate and take the lyrics and then write songs. And with those programs, they could actually collaborate and record and edit with each other, and they could do it live at the time they were doing it. And I think that's part of the biggest thing, is this whole online and COVID thing is giving us an opportunity as educators to think differently and think outside the box. We've always been great at that, I think, as music educators. We've always found obstacles, whether it was funding, whether it was balance of our ensembles. It seems like we're always in a fight for something, and here's an opportunity where we can look at how to do things different, overcome the obstacles by thinking outside the box. If we know there's certain things that we cannot do, then cross those off the list and think about what we can do and how we can then take that and turn it into an incredible educational experience.
I think, just again, riffing off of what Dan said, if we are all online if anybody's group is going to be ensemble is going to be online. I think we can teach jazz choir skills like sight reading, listening, music theory, part learning, obviously, solo singing, improvisation, exploring different grooves. It doesn't always have to culminate in a virtual choir performance. There's so many other things that you can do. Again, teaching songwriting. There's so many programs online that can help you to help your students. So many tutorials. There's just so much information available. And then I know there was a question also about, well, then are we working towards a performance? And if we decide that we do want to do a performance and have this be a performance-based class, what are some options for that? Has anybody thought about performance ideas?
I would say the pre-recording aspects. I have two things in addition to what Christine said. There's probably a way, if you can't live stream, maybe possibly a pre-recorded performance. That way you do it in a larger space that you have at your school, or if you could try that, I think that could work, even though there probably wouldn't be an audience there, but that's an idea. And then also in addition, what she said too, not only working on vocal jazz skills, but also think about in terms of a performance aspect, if you're really trying to build some type of product, what you could do is focus on building a large library of recordings, just making recordings with your ensembles. Just have the students, in the spring, one of the things I did, my students worked on, my top ensemble worked on 2 charts they never were able to perform. They were going to perform them several times in April. And so what I did was I had them send me 3 audio recordings of them singing the charts, 3 different times of them singing the charts, so I can triple track that and at least have a library of recordings for that chart. And these were 2 charts that were newly written for the ensemble from 2 different arrangers, one a student arrangers and one a faculty member. And so that's just an idea of how to do performance, even though you might not perform it live, but you can still have that recording for that particular arranger and that recording to help advertise your program. So those are just thoughts as well.
And that was audio only, not with video?
Well, we did it with video, but I decided not to do the virtual choir, so I actually put it together just as audio. And so, and also too, going off of Christine is one of the board members to Vocal Jazz Academy, which is also ran by Matt and Jessica Falker and Ian Brecky. And they had a discussion last week about copywriting and for like live performances and everything. And one of the panelists was Kerry Marsh, and he made a great point about you don't always have to do video. You could just do audio, and that would save you time. And then you could stream that audio to an app like SoundCloud, for example. That's something I might try to do this fall. So that's an idea of using some type of app that's out there to your advantage. And I think audio would be easier for all of us than video. You don't just, virtual choir is fine, but that's not the only option, I would think, either. So.
You know, to piggyback on one of the things you were saying, John, but also Christine, when you were talking about making it into smaller groups, because one of the things we've talked about at our school, also with our theater program, because we have this huge theater program that does 7 and 9 performances a year. And we said, well, what are we going to do for a musical? Is there a way of doing a musical? And fortunately, our musical is usually in the spring. But how do you look at musicals differently? And it made me, with some of the ideas we came up with, it made me think differently about choir, vocal jazz, and virtual streaming, which is what you were talking about, John. Is we talked about maybe doing, instead of a musical, doing like a cabaret, or doing something like, Smokey Joe, something that has lots of little pieces where you could have a small ensemble for that and a small ensemble for that, which is a little bit of what you were talking about, Christine. Maybe maybe even for choir, if we had small groups of 4 to 6 people. And right now, some of that, at least I know here where we are in Illinois, some of that could be done where people could get together in a small group of 4 to 6 people and perform something live with a microphone. And maybe we do that where you're logging in on Zoom and have a kind of a virtual streaming concert, but we're at this location for this piece, and then we switch to this location for this piece and this location, and they're just smaller ensembles instead of larger ensembles.
I was going to throw in, a couple of thoughts. Great things, by the way, going on. I'm getting ideas too as I'm listening to you all. One thing, since I didn't do any virtual choir or that kind of activity in the spring, however, I was teaching a class that is a requirement for our jazz voice majors where they work with rhythm section. So obviously I had a lot of challenge in that it's supposed to be them leading a band, and putting a chart in front of a band. And so you can't really replicate that in an online setting. What I did do was have the rhythm section record the chart. And so that was really revealing for the students not to be able to do a talk through, but to have to concisely type, here's what I want. And mostly we always are teaching them, make the chart say what you want. And easier said than done as they learn, because I said, okay, now you get to do a couple of comments and I'm going to send this to them. And then we will have each of them record and we'll see what comes back and try to put that together. But what I wanted to point out was that this got me thinking about my singer skills because, to be really honest, I had experienced when we were live and I was teaching the class, I had experienced noticing some of the things that rhythm section players needed to work on, but because we were in a live setting and time pressures, I didn't always address the things as helpfully as I might have. And what I noticed was when I received recordings back that the students made and had the visual, because of seeing waveforms and seeing time and seeing bars, I went, wow, if I sent a graphic of this track to the one student who has a tendency to rush, what a great opportunity for him to not be told by me, but to say, hey, take a look at this. And if you had a chance to do this again, see if you can improve upon, your tendency to be on the front side of time. And I was thinking, our students are different kinds of learners, right? And so sometimes in music, the visual can be really, really instructive. So that got me thinking about my own experiences of singing in the studio. And I'm working on learning Logic after an introductory, time with GarageBand, because I'm an Apple person. I've stepped up into learning Logic, and I'm finding the same thing to be true. I just had to record a solo over a chart that I wrote. And, I made a little recording loop and took 9 takes of it. And guess what? The first few weren't great, y'all, and it still hurt my ego, and I went through the same thing that my students are of, oh my gosh, why am I scooping like it? Okay, clean that up and blah, blah, blah. And then I had to fight the inner dialogue of downward spiral, right? The first few got a lot better, and then the last few were worse than the first ones that were bad. And so going through that myself reminded me that the benefits for our students of recording themselves, and really, frankly, I don't think it matters what it is. Like Christine says, it doesn't mean I'm making a virtual choir recording, but by simply taking something that's challenging for them and having them record it multiple times, like John said, or sending several in, and then having them possibly be able to visually see, look at every note doing this, scooping. And maybe some of them would be able to learn a lot better by seeing the graphic of that. So there's kind of a benefit, as well as obviously, gosh, as I'm doing my editing in Logic, I'm seeing, the fine tuning part where it says, oh, this is sitting 10 cents below center of pitch consistently. Okay, I guess my support isn't what I need it to be. I guess I'm not, right? So all of those things I think are tremendous opportunities to benefit. I think Christine used that term too, but the skill building aspect, that's really, really important. We want all our students to be doing that and not just responding to us telling them what to do, but them taking ownership of, oh, I see it, oh, I hear it, and the visual combined with the oral, I think is a great opportunity, either just for the fall semester or even this whole year, to say, learn to hold yourself to a higher standard. And I think that, can work at multiple levels, not just with students who are planning to be pro musicians, but it's especially good. So yeah, John.
Yeah, in addition to what Jen said, that's great. And I had that same experience when I received student recordings, and you could tell mechanically there might have been something I missed in rehearsal, but you could tell mechanically what they needed to work on. For example, in terms of maybe the usage of color, depending on what register they're in, or how they express a certain lyric, things of that nature. And so sometimes getting individual student recordings, you can hear some mechanical things that you probably didn't miss in rehearsal or don't have time to address in the rehearsal. So I had that experience vocally on my end. So that's a great point.
To add with some of the things you guys are talking about, you made me think of another project that I had my students do, which was, since most of them have phones, I had them use, I think the app's called Acapella or something like that. But I made all my students individually each come up with their own version of a song a cappella, where they had to record at least 3 or 4 part harmony. They could do anything they wanted, but it was eye-awakening for them to have to sing with themselves, because they had to hear themselves, they had to tune with themselves, they had to do all the, aligning vowels, or, not rush, not slow down, but understand their own concept of what they wanted. And yes, I'll say I did a couple of them myself to send out to my students as demos, and had to refrain from one of them where I actually spent time thinking out the arrangement and recorded what I wrote. And then I did another one where I just used my ear and would record something and then record something else and go, yeah, that didn't work. And I'd re-record it and find something that worked until I had 3 or 4 parts. But again, it was ear training and all sorts of other things. And that kind of goes hand in hand with some things that I heard you saying, Jennifer, and you saying, John, that reminded me that was another thing that I worked on that, really helped kids in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I know, just to shift the conversation a little bit, one of the questions that some people had was the health and safety issues of going back and doing things, in person. How could you do it safely? And I think a lot of it really depends on your situation. How big is the room? How many singers? Is it traditional choir? Is it vocal jazz? Are they singing into mics? Are they sharing equipment? But one thing that I think, as far as cleaning, because I know there was a question about how are you going to sanitize the equipment. If you're not in a position where each student can use their own microphone, there are these UV sanitizer boxes that are the quickest way to sanitize microphones, instead of, unscrewing the cap and like getting in there and letting them sit overnight or whatever. But there's tutorials online about that, and you can buy UV sanitizer boxes for that. And you can actually get ones that do an entire room as well. I bought one for my office. But I don't know if anyone else wants to contribute to that. But
I do. I was fortunate. I was able to record with my group, my spring group. We were able to do a studio recording, so I was very fortunate to do that. And the one thing our audio director at our school, he talked about, if you're going to just wipe things down, don't spray. The biggest thing is don't spray anything on equipment. Always spray it into some type of cloth and then wipe it down. That's number one. Don't spray anything on audio gear at all, because you could damage it easily. The other thing is too, if you're in a recording situation, using a filter, try to purchase some metal filters. I don't think they're that expensive, but use some type of metal pop filter instead of a cloth one. So those are can be easily cleaned. So those are things to think about as well. In terms of the UV lighting, that's something I would love to get into. So thanks for that reminder. So Christine, that'd be great.
And keep the doors open. As many doors or windows as you can open. Anything is going to help, I think.
One of the, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I was just going to say that's part of the strategy that I'm thankful for, that the room that we moved to has doors that lead to the outside of the building. So I'm all, cool, maybe a big fan. I know I was talking to Rosanna Eckert, and she was talking about the big fan that will be in her office. You know, and I'm like, well, you want to blow it out in the hallway on the people who are walking? I'm not sure that's quite how the science works, though. So I think maybe the big fan is still a good idea, but yeah.
I have a question for all of you, too. Jen, you just mentioned the double doors that you have. Do all of you just have one set of doors that lead out into the hallway, or do you have a couple of doors where students can just enter only through this door and maybe exit another door? Do all of you have that situation or not? Or
I know that I have the doors that lead into the choir room and out, but I also have a quote-unquote emergency exit that goes to the outside. So I do have two ways in and out, and that outside door is about 15 feet from another door that leads back into the building. So I hadn't thought about that, but I don't know if they would let me leave that door open or use it.
Right.
But yeah, at least that's how my room is for the most part. We're in and out of one door, you know, but it's a double door. It's a big door, but it's still one location.
Well, I brought that up because of social distancing, because if I let the students enter and exit out the same door, then it just causes congestion in that hallway. So that's just an idea I was thinking about.
Hey, everyone. I think we're going to take some questions from our audience now. How's that sound?
Awesome.
All right. So the first one's kind of a basic question, but I think all of you may have a different answer to it. This is from Bruce. Bruce says, curious as you describe space issues and other mitigation methods, where are you getting your information from? Administration, local, or state government? Thanks.
As far as my university is concerned, the provost and president are working with the health advisor from the university, which is also working with the health advisor from the city of Long Beach. So everything has to get approved through the city as well, which, you know, makes it difficult, but we want to be safe.
I think for us, our district is basically following the guidelines that are being set forth by our state and by the Illinois State Board of Education, which I think all ultimately goes back to the state. So that is sort of where we are at this point.
And I'm in the same state as Andrew, and yeah, they released a 63-page document of the guidelines for. We are in what's called phase 4 of a 5-phase. So it's the guidelines for returning to school and how to make it safe and effective. And that's just a guideline. It doesn't mean the district can be more conservative than the guideline, but the guideline is there to help you know how to get back.
I know in our city, go ahead, Jen.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say the College of Music at UNT, there are a whole lot of people working on these safety issues, and it's coming down in bits and pieces, but I know it's a work in progress. And as things, you know, shift, again, as everyone has said, daily, weekly, hourly, I am not holding anything too tightly about what is being said right now, but I know people are working on it at all levels up the chain. So like I said, I'm just sort of wait and see.
Mm-hmm. We're in the same boat where we're mostly following city guidelines, even though they take state guidelines, but mostly everything we're doing is based off of city guidelines based on our particular situation.
Anybody else want to touch on that at all or anymore, or should we move on? All right, we'll take another one. There are a lot of questions along this same line, so I'm just going to kind of bait you all. But many of the questions are coming around this concept of a hybrid or blended rehearsal setting where you may not, for some portion of time or perhaps for the fall, be able to have all of your students in the room at the same time. So do you have any thoughts or suggestions? And could you perhaps maybe touch on the topic of that hybrid rehearsal setting and what your plan for having a large ensemble through that type of medium would be concerned?
I think it just depends on your philosophy. I mean, what's your philosophy? Are you trying to produce a product? Are you trying to, is the number one goal that you have is to trying to build their skill set? I just think it depends on what's your mission statement. And then based off that mission statement, you can answer a lot of those questions yourself, really. But it just depends on what you're going for. That's the ultimate thing, I think.
I think, John, I think you nailed it on the head. And it goes back to that whole thing that I said earlier about thinking outside the box. Maybe we don't need to be performance driven for a little while. And you know, you could split groups in. Maybe you do pick a piece of literature and everybody's learning the same thing. And maybe you only have the altos now or the sopranos or the tenors. And maybe you could use that music to learn as the medium to do some other things, but maybe we focus more on those other things than we normally have in the past, because right now we don't know that there's a deadline for a performance because we don't know when concerts are going to happen again. So instead I would use the music as a tool for teaching and let that be the guide for the time being.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know one thought idea that I have. We are hopeful that we'll be able to do a live performance, streamed. But since we usually do a few performances during the semester, I'm definitely thinking about dividing and doing, even if it's just Facebook Live kind of thing, of going through the soundboard. Again, setting it up. It will take some time to come up with, is this feed from the soundboard something that could be broadcast, to get a good balance, that kind of thing. But my thought is that having those kinds of things like, hey, we're going to go live on this day and share our music with one piece of music, everybody's in the same boat. So I think the idea of I think Dan said it before, not focusing on what we can't do, but saying, hey, we're still making music and we can still share that with the world. I don't even care if it's a whole piece, but we've been working really hard on this particular thing and we want to share it with you. I think our community, frankly, my opinion is that it's a very warm, wonderful, accepting and encouraging kind of space. So I think putting things out there, even if they're not complete products or projects or whatever, I think people would be very supportive and encouraging of students' efforts and our efforts to share music, even in those maybe smaller type of things. And that could be, I don't know, that doesn't address the hybrid thing so much, but I defer to the others who have thought more about that particular thing.
Yeah, the hybrid thing is, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just going to say to add one more thing. Thanks, Drew. As people are looking for this virtual hybrid, how are we going to do things? I want to do a little advertisement. There is another webinar tomorrow night. It is being run, if you're familiar with Caleb Chapman and the Caleb Chapman Sound House, but they've come up with some ideas to help rehearse, perform, and produce choirs, bands, orchestras, jazz bands, vocal jazz groups, everything. And because all of us are on this, are probably over 90% choral people, he's got a powerhouse panel doing the presentation tomorrow night. And one of those people is Tim Sharp. Tim Sharp is the executive director of the American Choral Directors Association. And he is supporting this seminar tomorrow night and some of these ideas. So if you're looking and you have time, I know Jesse can throw that link up for you, and then you can register. It's a 1-hour thing, and it's just got a lot of incredible, powerful people that have done a lot of research and have some things to offer. And it would be worth checking out.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Drew. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So in terms of the hybrid thing, I think, again, the hybrid thing can mean so many different things. Does that mean like we have some of our kids in classroom and some not, or do we have them, in person some days or some days not? There's so many different possible scenarios. And, one thing I think that's, I think we've all sort of touched on is, this is such a good time to recenter our practice and what we do and how we can use music to serve our students, right? And I forget, I think I was reading it in the comments, and also we talked about, taking this time to develop those musical skills that normally we just say, okay, we got to learn how to do this, but we don't have time. And so I know that this past semester, I did a lot of, sight reading work using Sight Reading Factory. If you haven't checked that out, it's really, really wonderful. It's great for, especially for high school and middle school students, I think, just to work on separate, different concepts that you want them to understand. And you can create, specific levels to work on different intervals, different rhythms. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And my students, as much as they hated sight reading, they knew that it was valuable, and they said so toward the end of the semester. And, even if it's not through repertoire, they can still learn some singing skills. Like, we know that Zoom is not good with latency, so we won't even talk about that. But you can work on, hey, basses hold this note, tenors hold this note, et cetera, and tune chords. They can still listen with long tones, as long as you have your sound settings correct, and that's a whole different thing. But, you can totally do work like that, and there's a lot of call and response you can still do. There's still lots of elements of our normal rehearsals that we can definitely use. Just we as the educators have to think a little bit differently because we're not in the same room as them. And as far as students that maybe are immunocompromised and can't be inside the room, I think it's really important that we do recordings, do videos of ourselves demonstrating things, and put our videos of our class meetings, both in person and on Zoom, online, so they can see them. And just making sure again that they coming back to the sense of family and community, to make sure that they're feeling included and not like they're not part of the whole picture as well.
I wanted to throw in one idea. I saw Knetra Miller's name in the chat for a minute, and it made me think of something that I learned from her a while ago, and I have employed ever since with my ensembles, which is the idea of using the ensemble as a way for students to also, I guess this is my paraphrase, she didn't say it this way, but an appreciation and understanding of what jazz singing does, what's required technically. I think philosophically a super important bedrock principle for me is that this music needs to be listened to because it is like learning a second language. So we can talk about all these things that we want to do for our kids and building their skills, but and those are great. I think it must be in addition to continuing a focus on their listening to the music. And so one of the ways that I saw and heard Knetra do with her group that was so impressive to me was taking a Carmen McRae recording of Sometimes I'm Happy. And she and her student came up with an arrangement together where her, women were literally, it was as if they were singing along with the Carmen McRae recording. And so I'm thinking, what a great COVID exercise to take a recording by a solo jazz singer artist and have the students all listening and going, what would I have to do with my voice? Technically to modify my sound, to get this style, to do more or less scooping, to be brighter, darker, fatter, use more vibrato, less vibrato. All of the different parameters, have them exploring that with their voices and then singing along with and matching. That's an exercise that our students are doing all the time because they're jazz majors. But bringing that into the ensemble setting is also, I think, a wonderful exercise because to me, it helps them learn another really valuable, important principle of ensemble singing, which is anything can blend. The only way to blend in a vocal jazz ensemble used to be, I would say back in the day, use this breathy, airy tone and take out a lot of inflection and then everybody sounds the same and it's cool and we're blended. And I'm like, but that's missing things like grit and personality and soul and style and all these things that are also really, really important. So anything and everything can blend. It's just a matter of everybody doing the same thing, whatever that thing is. So if it's sometimes I'm happy, okay, probably your kids never sing like that. So what happens if they do? And what if 5 of them do it the same way together? And so that could be a really nice bridge between what I'm working on individually and then bringing the recordings together, and or when we get to be together in person again, we do it together.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on, well, something everybody's kind of touched on, going back to the performances. And one of the things I thought of too is, John, you mentioned this, is what's your mission statement? What's your why? So I think it's really revisiting your standard course outcomes, or what's your why? Basically, what do you want them to be able to do by the end of the semester? I'm pretty sure none of us direct or sing in ensembles because it's all about the performance, right? I mean, so what's your group mission, and let that be defined by you and your students. What things do you want to get out of it? What can you focus on that will meet those or meet that mission? For my mental, emotional, spiritual health, for friendship, for camaraderie, to educate myself, to entertain and be entertained, to bring joy to myself and others. There's just so many reasons that we sing. And I was talking with Kate McGarry yesterday, and she hipped me to this interview by Dr. Bernice Reagan Johnson. And in this interview, she says, the songs are a way to get to singing. The singing is what you're aiming for. It increases our ability to feel and to tolerate feeling. So I know this is a very aesthetic thing, but that's why the arts were created. And so it's really, I think, revisiting our mission statement, and does it have to culminate in a performance, and how can we do this? We got to be creative.
Do we have any more questions out there, Jesse? Or did we lose Jesse?
I'm wondering if we did. Hey, this is Sharon popping in. Let me grab those. Have a feeling our host got kicked off there. Sorry, folks out there. Oh, there he is, back in.
Half in and half out.
Half in. There we go. Jesse, any other questions for them?
Yeah, there are a couple more questions here. I've got one for you, particularly, and this is interesting, especially after some of the things we were seeing on the news yesterday. The question is about what the questioner called the choir PR problem. Have you all thought anything about this in terms of, we're obviously seeing studies and things on the news that are painting live singing in a particularly negative light. So have you thought a little bit about your messaging to either your students, or for those of you who are teaching minors, to your parents in terms of PR around choir and returning to singing in the fall?
I know from my point of view, the one thing like I had talked about is, I think if we have the mask on until, further notice, then at least we're minimizing the sound, the aerosol going out. But there's been a lot of mixed information out there and a lot of different studies, and it depends on who you talk to, because now they're telling people it's okay to have, at least in Illinois, we can have gatherings of 50 or less if we're, and we can be in restaurants that get loud. And to put it bluntly, sometimes people talk pretty loud and stuff goes out in the air, no different than as if we're singing. Sometimes people forget that singing is just a way of talking with music. I'm not saying that we're not putting a lot more air out there, but I think there's just as much risk or just as little risk in singing in those situations as there are in being in your backyard with a group of 50 people or 20 people. That would be my personal take from what I've read and talked about. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
That's a great comment. And thanks, Dan. I feel more comfortable myself as I go to class this fall. But in addition to that, one thing that makes me feel comfortable, in May, my college opened up to faculty and staff to return to their offices as needed. And one thing that makes me feel comfortable, we're required to wear a mask, of course, but they also check the temperature at the door. And so that makes me feel comfortable. So it depends on your institution. Are they checking temperature at the door? And if they're not doing that, can you do that for your classroom? It's just another precaution that you have to take. And it could be a little time consuming, but is there a way to monitor that? Taking any pre-precautions before the students even come to your room. So that's just another thought. But I know because my institution checks temperature at the door and they don't let people through if there is a fever, then I already feel a little bit more comfortable. That doesn't fully answer the question, but that's just an addition to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that for us to get even into our school, to get into our offices, to just get things we might need. Every time we go in, or we have to have a temperature taken, and we have to sign in, and so they're being really careful about the guidelines that they're using, and I assume that they're going to be doing the same thing once school starts. Although again, we don't know for sure. But all I know is that I will be sending correspondence to my parents and to my students, just trying to let them know we don't know anything. No, I mean, but honestly, just letting them know that we will do whatever we can to keep them safe. And, if there are concerns that they have, that we will address those as much as possible, even if that means not having some kids in school for a while, because I think that may have to be an option for some students and teachers as well that are immunocompromised. So, it's really about thinking about the general health of everybody. And yeah, I mean, I think that's all we can do as far as talking to our parents and our students about that at this point. Particularly as Jesse said, we're working with a lot of minors, so we've got to really make sure that they're being taken care of.
And be honest with them.
Yes.
Yeah, honesty. That's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're just going to have to be flexible. I mean, for me personally, I know I can't go back to status quo. I can't do things that I've always done. We're just going to have to slow down, take a breath, check in with people, and be flexible and creative in the way that we're offering the information. It's just going to be different. And I think that's not all bad. I think it's a really wonderful opportunity to have change, and hopefully really positive change in music education.
I was going to say I had an experience not long ago that I was sharing with a friend about how with the massive increase of stress in everybody's lives, part of, John, when you said being honest, I thought, boy, it's pretty honest to talk about that and say that part of what music is about is humanity. And I've always talked to my students about in performance that you're putting beauty and art out into the world, not to solve the world's problems. That's somebody else's jobs. That's a politician. I mean, you get what I'm saying? Just if our role as musicians is anything, it is more important now than ever that the world desperately needs beauty and art to still be present. And so we might not be able to do that, like Christine said, in the way that we are most comfortable and it seems easy to us. But we're still aiming towards that. I was going to say the experience I had was that I realized the other day when radio came on, and actually it was on a classical Sirius XM station, and some Foray piece came on. It was so gorgeous. I started crying in my car And I just had a moment of going, oh wow, I had no idea how much I needed that. Like not listening to music for academic reasons or to plan my repertoire or to anything, but to literally have it minister to me in my soul and in my troubled spirit. That is a real thing. And so I think we need to be talking about that honestly too. Like you need the music for you. Parents, the world needs it, right? And these students are part of offering that out into the world.
Fantastic. I'm going to jump in. This is Sharon, and I'll pop in here so people aren't seeing that Jesse's having a little bit of technology coming in and out. But one of the questions was this, and then we might think about wrapping up. I think we can have follow-up questions in a survey, and people can continue to put them in the thread. But this question, beyond the music, what are some choir family building activities that we can do with the students? Being at a boarding school, we are an even deeper connected group. If we are virtual, I don't want to lose the close community that we built, especially with new members. Who would like to take that one?
I'll jump in quick because I do some things at the beginning of the year every year with our retreat and some things that we do. But specific to that scenario, I think couple of things that they could do is maybe have some, I don't know the right term is, maybe big brother, big sister relationships, maybe team freshmen with some of the seniors, and do things where there's outreach, where there's connections, do some things, some silly things where do a big Zoom call and have everybody talk about their favorite kind of ice cream or their favorite movie or their favorite Netflix, but things that will get kids talking and communicating and will let them see common bonds and common links that, that person is new and that person, and we both like this. And, but it's a little different when we're not going to all be in the same room. But I think there's some ways, again, to how would you do it if you were in the room? And can you just say, okay, we're not in the room, we're going to use Zoom? And how can we go a step further? Like I said, big sister, big brother, looking for ways to build relationships that work. And it does work because I can say, not that it's about my personal life, but, I met my wife years ago on the internet. So, we built a relationship first on the internet before we met each other in person. So how can you use our tools that we have now to find each other and those common grounds? That would be my take on it.
I have another take as well. That's a great point, Dan. One thing you could do, I've done this in the past 1 year, we just tried to use some fun elementary, even though I teach college, use some fun elementary athletic event like kickball, or something like that. Some outdoor, it doesn't have to be athletic, but just some type of outdoor activity where you're not touching many things or have to touch each other. And you can easily do the social distancing, some type of outdoor activity like that. I just thought of kickball because you don't really you just probably touch the ball, but you can easily clean your hands afterwards. It's just an idea. But if there's a way to get even a group of them together to do something like that, that could help with some team building.
And to there's also a lot of online stuff. Like this past semester, I did several online events with my students. All choir events where, if you've heard me talk about this on here, you'll know what I'm talking about. The Jackbox games. Those are it's a set of online games. If any of you ever played, you don't know Jack. Back in the day, there are game packs that you can purchase. And you can play them with people who are away from remote from you, because all they need is their phone to play. And you can share your screen through Zoom. And it is a lot of fun. And my kids kept on asking to do those over and over again. And they are family friendly most of of them. They have family-friendly filters, so you can play with the young ones as well. And it's a good way, just to get them kind of interacting with each other and, being excited about something. I also did or actually my colleague at the other high school in our district did what she called a lack of talent show, where they just sort of like showed off like the weird things that they could do with their nose or their eyebrow or their ear or something weird like that, and so just silly things so that they get used to not being afraid in front of each other. And, of course, having your older students lead those activities, just to kind of show, hey, we're okay being weird and silly here. This is our family. And the one last thing we did was a choir sort of open mic night coffee house sort of thing, where people could perform from their homes, or they could pre-record a performance and play it at that time. Because, we all know, we were hurting for having any sort of performance outlet, So I think that stuff like that can bring them together is really, really wonderful. And kind of going off what Dan said, having them talk about their favorite ice cream, with Zoom, you can break them into those smaller breakout rooms and have some older kids with the younger kids and really have them interact, have them learn about each other, and, have your student leaders do those sorts of things. And I think that you'll find that the younger kids will open up with that and feel like they're part of the family.
Thank you, Drew. I made it back, everyone. I lost connection for a minute, but I'm happy to be joining you again. Does anybody have anything else they want to add before we sign off here and invite everyone to our next event? No? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining. Oh, John's got something. Go ahead, John.
Don't be afraid to not only be honest, but to take risk. I'm not talking about like risking lives or anything. That don't be, like what Dan said, don't be afraid to get outside the box, because sometimes that's difficult for people. So in terms of yourself, take risk in your teaching, in your education. So hopefully this is helpful.
And I'll throw one more thing out. I think on behalf of the 5 people that are on this, feel free to reach out to me or anybody here. I think any of us are more than welcome to talk and share our ideas. We don't have the answers, as I said earlier when we started. And reach out to your colleagues. Reach out to other people in your networks, in your, if you're a high school teacher, talk to other high school directors, see what they're doing. And I'll plug, become a member of the Jazz Education Network if you're not a member, because there's a lot of cool stuff like this going on, which is out there to help.
And really quickly, another resource, the Vocal Jazz Academy has an Educator Support page that's been great. And we have happy hours every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and we've been discussing a lot of these different questions and issues, and it's been incredibly helpful. So just shout out for that.
Thank you all very much for being here with us today. We'd like to again thank Dan Gregerman, Christine Guter, Jennifer Barnes, John Stafford, and Drew Dahan. I have been posting links in the chat as we've been going here. I just posted the link to Caleb's event, the Soundhouse event tomorrow. We've got the link to the Jackbox games that Drew mentioned. Also put up some links to the in-ear monitoring system that Jennifer mentioned earlier. We will be leaving this webinar up on our Facebook page. We'll also be archiving it on our website. Please check us out online, jazzednet.org, become a member, and stay tuned for the announcement of some more opportunities like this, some more webinars coming up over the summer, and of course, stay tuned for some news about our conference, which is coming up in January. Thank you again so much to the panel. Thanks for being with us here today. And we will see you again, I'm sure, on another panel like this or on another event. We'd love to have you all back to share your expertise again with us about another subject. Thank you all so much.
Bye.